Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Once again, we are together, although quite separate. This week, in a certain sense, hasn't been all of that notable, I would say. Simply, in terms of COVID-19, we have easily, between last week and this week, almost 2 million more cases. So it seems like every week it's between 1 million and 2 million new, actually confirmed cases. This is at a time when the whole world is opening up. So I think there's a lot of wishful thinking in a certain way going on. The United States is very stably listing around 1,000 fatalities every day. As I mentioned in my notice for this, this is perhaps a record, but not one which the country should be proud of. Yes, there are terrible fires in California. There's also still great tension between China and the United States. Belarus is in no better shape than it was last week and is still very dangerous. Yeah. But at least we are here today and we can actually go into our little world, this but very, very important world that we have of music and art and what I would call the sublime accomplishments of humanity. Tuesday, though, was the day when Tennessee finally, as the last state necessary, ratified the 19th Amendment, which actually gave women in the United States the right to vote. Okay, can you hear me actually? Yeah, okay, good. I'm getting all these signals once again. So, anyway, however, before that, actually, basically Great Britain, Germany even, for the end of the First World War, and Russia, of course, when they turned communist, socialist, had already given women the right to vote. So the United States anyway lagged behind much of the world. And even though the 19th Amendment guaranteed women, especially white women, let's say, women of, and we can even say white Christian women perhaps, the right to vote, it was not all-encompassing, and in 1923, I believe it is. I mean, I may be okay. I'm babbling away. Yes, but it's okay. It's all right. The Equal Rights Amendment was introduced to Congress, and what is really a stain on, I believe, this country's history, and on this country's, in a certain way, ethos, the United States I'm talking about, of course, my beloved homeland, is that to this very day, the Equal Rights Amendment, which you think would be something that's totally obvious, that people should have equal rights, even though, originally in our Constitution, certain members of the human race were considered to be only, 3/5, I believe, of a person. And, anyway, this Human Rights Amendment still has not been ratified. And what I just read was in, I believe it's in Georgia, but I may be mixed up because so many different things are happening now. The governor has stated that in nursing homes, in other words, this is for our elders, the people who are infirm also, no matter how many cases of COVID-19 there will be or are, the government will count that as one. So here we have even a person not being even 3/5 of a complete person, but perhaps 1/80th or something like that. This is absurd. Okay, enough. Good. As a prelude to a basic discussion about Nielsen and about psychology and music, I want to sort of honor the ratification of the 19th Amendment with a little description and introduction to 4 composers who could have been very significant, but simply were not because of their gender. So I will start here and play little bits of their pieces, of course. Since again, these are people who I've just been looking at recently and had no idea about myself. All of this is a big embarrassment for me, I must say. Here we go. Wait, let me do this. As usual, I did not set myself up in the right way. So let me try once again. I know I spent too much time with this. Okay. Let's go to here. Okay. Come on. Let's try again. Okay. Sorry. No, it's not working. Once again. Have to connect again. Let me check another thing. Sorry. I will be okay. So Bluetooth here. Audio play 2 should be connected. Okay. But sound is not connected. I know. It's just so terrible. And I'm so incompetent about this. But why, I don't quite understand. Okay. Got it, I believe. Okay. So the first one, I found so very, very interesting. These actually are not American composers, but the first was Anna Amalia, who's the abbess of Quedlinburg, and she was the sister of Frederick the Great. Now, Frederick the Great was a great patron of the arts, a flutist, a good musician, but his sister was much more talented and was actually quite a significant composer who, because of not only her station in life, but because of her sex, was not able to actually gain recognition as she could have. She was also a collector of music and well, kind of patron, I would say, also of composers such as Telemann. But her pieces themselves are quite extraordinary in a way. And this is a little bit of a sonata which she wrote for oboe and organ. Oboe. Oh, God. I'm sorry about that. Yes. What? Oh, no. Okay. Okay. So that is Anna Amalia, the sister of Frederick the Great. Now the next is another Anna Amalia, who I believe was her niece, actually. And this, he was called Duchess Anna Amalia of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. And she lived later on into the 19th century. And she also was quite an accomplished composer, and she was a good friend of people such as Goethe, of course, Schiller, and was also a patron of the arts, of course, as all of them were, and was very important because the area of Weimar, where she was a duchess, she actually transformed into the preeminent cultural center of Germany. And again, someone who I did not know. Okay. Let me go to that one. Yeah. Okay. Here we are. the least interesting part because that was not written by her, the cadenza, of course. But very good composer, Anna Amalia von Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel. That's also so interesting. I move now to another composer, and the reason for her also, and this is going to be a problem. Here, a little bit. Her name is Alice Mary Smith, and she lived in the middle of the 19th century, 1839 to 1884. She was an English composer, and the reason I mention her, aside from the fact that she was actually quite a very good composer, is that she did write some very wonderful pieces for clarinet. So she's someone really to pay attention to. And I try this here. If we can take Alice Mary Smith. Okay. And this is Symphony in C minor, if I can actually. So many ads. There we go. I should stop now with this. Again, this is Alice Mary Smith. She was very prolific, and she did write wonderful works for the clarinet. So look her up for sure. It's really cool. Very nice. There's the last one. I know. It's a little bit much, but I thought this is kind of necessary for just today. That's is Lily Boulanger. Now, Lily Boulanger is better known than the other composers, but still not known perhaps as she should be. But she was also a case of someone whose life and career, of course, was cut way short. She lived only 24 years. And had she lived longer, she would have been a major force, I believe, in the music of the 20th century. Lily Boulanger was Nadia Boulanger's younger sister. And as Nadia always said, she was the more talented of the two. In fact, she was not only the more talented, she was remarkably talented. And at the age of 2, when she was only 2 years old, Fauré pronounced her a genius. That's quite something. She only lived till 1918. And this is a work I want to maybe, I don't know if I really can play all of it. I want to play at least a bit. This is the last work of that she wrote, 1918. It's the last, I would say, work that's totally complete by her. D'un soir triste. Sad night, and it's very, very striking. Okay, it's orchestral work, of course. Oh no. Oh no.
Turn off.
Oh no.
No, don't turn off that.
No. I'm sorry. Let me continue.
Sorry.
skip around a little bit, I think. This is, since it's fascinating work. Skip just to the end. Toward the end. Okay. This is D'un soir triste, 1918, Lily Boulanger. You can hear the mastery of orchestration, the originality of her harmonic language, even though, of course, it owes much to what everything else that was happening in France at the time, but is anyway quite extraordinary. With these four people and others who I've mentioned before, we cannot say exactly that the world of music would have changed had they been recognized, had they lived, etc. But of course, the history of music is quite enriched when we know not only of their existence, but of their work. So I thought I should do this, even though it's a little bit long, perhaps. Okay. But that's enough of this. Now I go to the topic at hand, and you've all been waiting, I guess, more or less patiently for this. And this, once again, has to do with Nielsen's Clarinet Concerto. That's 1928, the last, I believe, instrumental work that he wrote, and one of his most remarkable pieces, and I would say one of the very remarkable works of the early 20th century. The work, as I mentioned last week, and as you all know, that who are, at least those of you who are clarinetists, of course, know, that the genesis of the work had to do with his friend Eugen Oxenvad, and my apologies to everyone from Denmark who's listening to this, because I don't pronounce any of the names correctly, I'm sure. And I should probably have some kind of a course, speedy course about how to do this. But anyway, and just to recapitulate, it started in 1922, the idea of concertos, as he wrote his quintet for the Copenhagen Quintet. And he was originally going to write a concerto for each member, but of course in 1926 he wrote the flute concerto, and then it was only in 1928 that he wrote the clarinet concerto, and he did not live to write any more of the concertos. Now, the clarinet concerto, though, is very special, and as I mentioned, there's a big psychological aspect to this piece. And of course, we cannot say that it is a psychological study per se, but on the other hand, perhaps we can say it is a collection of psychological impressions. Now, I'm sure that Nielsen was not only thinking of Oxenvad in this piece. This is after his heart attack, and he was not well, so there were in senses in him of his own mortality, I believe. But this in psychological conflict that is in this piece, I think does come very much from Oxenvad. Now Oxenvad, again, as I had mentioned, is thought perhaps to be bipolar. Perhaps he would. I've read that he had schizophrenia. We don't know that he was a manic depressive, etc., etc. Perhaps he was just moody. And it's, I think, not a very good idea to actually type him as with particular psychological disease, which we have no idea about. But the piece does have this sense of not only conflict, but a kind of awareness of different personalities. Okay. That said, also, there's a general impression of this piece that it was kind of, maybe a kind of automatic writing, or it's completely not structured in any kind of way, and that is very wrong. It's actually tremendously carefully written, even though Nielsen himself mentioned when he was writing that he didn't quite know what he was doing, perhaps. I'm paraphrasing in a kind of primitive way. But it is impressively, cohesively written. But the form of the piece, as I would say, has much more to do with kind of theater, or sort of a play, or kind of a monologue or even we can say a diary of a person, rather than sort of musical form that we have. And I will talk a bit about that. I will say once again as well that much of the information I have about this piece came from two wonderful Danish clarinetists, Jens Schou and John Kruse. And to Kruse I especially owe a debt of gratitude because he actually gave me a copy of the manuscript clarinet part, which Nielsen wrote for Oxenvad while he was in the process of writing the work. So this is very much, this clarinet part, an example of his original ideas for this piece. And certain things you see him changing in it because perhaps of conversations with Oxenvad, etc., etc. I mentioned last week about one passage which was originally slurred. It's actually a series of passages, and I will talk about that again, but then was changed, of course. And I won't spend time actually showing these. I would just, because it will just take too much time, I think, but I will mention certain things. Now, this is what I gathered from conversations with Kruse and with Jens Schou, and with other readings I did, and also just looking at the piece as well. There are a few things. First of all, apparently Nielsen was not satisfied with his notation, but Oxenvad told him you should write it in the most simple way possible. Now, I think that probably created misunderstandings about the piece, because the piece is written in rather strict, or I should say academic way, but the idea of the piece is much freer and more a sense of cadenza, perhaps, from beginning to end. And this heightened expression that we need in this piece is something that we do not see so immediately in the markings of the work. We also have a bit of a problem because the publications, even the first publication, and then especially the revision when it was republished, it's now whatever is it 10 years ago or more, I think has created problems in and of itself, because both of them did not follow in an intelligent way what Nielsen actually wrote. And there's little details which, in fact, I think were very, very important to see. And then I will point those out as well. In fact, perhaps I start out by pointing these. And this is a case where, as I mentioned in my introduction, where what is called urtext could probably better be called poor text, in fact. Okay. There are certain things which Nielsen did change, but which should be mentioned in these editions, because I see, at least, and I'm not the only one who sees these changes as something which, or as changes, I should say, which were done at the behest of Oxenvad, perhaps for technical reasons, let's say. Okay, so with that, I have to get to a clarinet, and then first I will insert things for you. Now, I'm thinking I will use this. Okay. And then I got totally mixed up with my reeds, as usual. I think not that, or maybe. You know, I think this is wrong. I use this. Here, and then I use one of these. Let's see if this works. Perhaps this. I don't think so. I know every time, every week this happens. Well, you know, in this situation here, I'm just always sort of experimenting with this and that and the other thing, and I get confused. So, bear with me, and in any case, I guess it sort of works. Okay, so the first thing is simply here. Which was originally slurred. And we, of course, see in his orchestration that Nielsen did not, when he changed it, did not think in a very comprehensive way, let's say, because basically the orchestral interjections, I should say, or replies or whatever, are slurred still, basically, that way. Okay, so this is something which, although he did change it for the clarinet part, should have been mentioned, at least, in an Urtext edition. This way. Now, something else. Here, going on, we have this. That part there, and I will talk about this more in a second in a kind of musical and structural way. But Nielsen's original for this was to have a double dotted F sharp and a 32nd note. Okay, and I think that is actually quite important. And once again, even though it is changed in his manuscript, the original should have somehow been noted here, because the sense of kind of uncertainty, and this is what I will get to and when I speak more comprehensively about the piece, comes across with the 32nd note, and everything else in the piece, in this section here, there, oh, that's good. Everything else is actually a 32nd note, so it's kind of this, that. Oh, what's it? I don't know. And then we come to the cadenza from that. Now you play a 16th note, and it becomes very normal. think that 32nd note is a note of genius in it. So, okay, now we move to the cadenza here. And what's very interesting, looking at the manuscript, this is the clarinet part, is he has the crescendo going up, and then this is forte, and then he has no other marking. It's all forte. Then what you see in pencil is he wrote piano here after. Okay, I don't really like this read, but I put it on incorrectly. So let me put it back. Okay. Then, and I mention this especially because I've heard so many times, it's kind of ridiculous, that this is piano, and then there's no other marking until we have that going up to fortissimo that way, with the sforzando there. And that becomes kind of absurd if this is piano and then all of a sudden this huge explosion. But what we see also in pencil, in his manuscript, right from there, crescendo. So, our feeling that we need to do that, of course, is correct. Because this is what Nielsen wrote. Now this, I think, is a serious lapse in the publications, even though it did not make it into the final score. The sense, I think, is there. Okay, now going on with that, we have originally he just wrote 64th notes that way. But of course, as he mentioned that he wanted this to be more like cadenza from beginning to end, and Nielsen, he played piano, of course, he played violin, he also played the trombone. That's a lot of this piece has this sense of violin or string writing in a way, and would be very normal. And all of these markings that we see in the part finally were also in pencil. And afterwards must have been at the behest of Oxenvad. You wanted perhaps more direction. Okay, I move on to other places in the piece, and I'm going to move on to the end right now. And first, though, I play here. This is the end of this first cadenza, where we have remember that A natural. And then the second cadenza, this should be A natural. Ah! I recomposed the piece, made it more jolly. But anyway, that A natural is very important there, because we then see that these two endings of both cadenzas are related in a very important and actually significant way for the piece. Okay. The one problem we have with it is that originally Nielsen wrote this in sharps. So we have a G sharp, E, A, C. Then when it was redone into flats, they forgot to write natural. Okay. Now the new edition, the old edition didn't bother with anything, but the new edition actually mentions something, but says that no, it's the final manuscript is A flat. It should be A flat. Again, this is a case of urtext being poor text, or I should say, editing without understanding. So I would have hoped that people who are actually taking the trouble to put out a new edition, I should just as an aside say that I did write, this was also at the suggestion of John Kruse, write certain suggestions that would be nice to put in this new edition. Of course, I think they looked at this letter from some clarinet player from America and just threw it in the garbage, you know, even though I was not an unknown quantity in Denmark. But I'm not a scholar, perhaps. You know, I guess like you can say like Brahms was not a scholar, even though he was the foremost scholar of Baroque music and of his time, I would say. Okay, enough of this, enough of this. I know. I have to zip my mouth and all these terrible things I'm saying. So anyway, so we have here, and I go back to the first one because that actually shows it in a very significant way. Okay, and there, this is, we go to the concert pitch here, and with this I'm going to segue to actually looking at the piece itself. We go to F and then half step change from that. So this change of half step, which is like this change of personality, in a way, is something that is the most significant part of this piece. And we see this in larger form, and we see this in detail, like here. So, with that in mind, I go back to the piano now, and perhaps I will pretty much stay there, I think. There's more to, in terms of problems with the edition, but I will mention, especially one, as I go through the piece. Okay, now, it is generally said that there's a conflict in this piece, general conflict between F major and E major, or F and E here, and that is very true. We have that. Things are more complicated, though, because they involve the dominance of those keys. In other words, C and B. Also, we could have subdominance of those keys as well. But all of them are related in, I would say, very classical ways. And I'm not going to spend all the time to go look at things in such detail, but I will point out things which I think are, of course, most important about this here. Okay, so we start in F major, of course, here. But what he does from the beginning is he outlines what is his essential chord there. And with that in mind, I actually have to quote two things from Nielsen. One, came actually from an essay he wrote about Wagner. and here I'll write, this is, there is only one remedy for this man's musical taste, and that is a cultivation of the most basic intervals. The glutted must be taught to regard a melodic third as a gift of God, a fourth as an experience, and a perfect fifth as the most sublime joy. Careless crapulence undermines one's health. Thus, we see how essential it is to maintain an association with the original, which is these intervals. Okay. And he also wrote, we must first acquire respect for the simplest intervals, live with them, listen to them, learn from them, and love them. The composer must do this for the sake of the intervals themselves. The singer for the sake of his song, the instrumentalist perhaps most of all, because he, by way of his technical advantage, runs the risk of losing the sense of expressive simplicity. Okay. It's enough of that, but this sense of interval is critical in this piece in so many ways. I'm just not going to explain all of them, but certain ones. Now, this here, as I mentioned last week also, and the inversion here, those two are his basic chords. And you will find these chords in every significant moment in this piece. The beginning of every transition, toward the end of the piece, of course, the very beginning, in the way he constructs his melodies, etc. So this is very important. And then what he does is he takes these chords and he distorts them in a way by half steps. And the half step creates the tension. So the tension between the F and the E, this comes from this basic tension. Okay, now along with this, there is the augmented fourth. And this augmented fourth, or I should say tritone, because it really has kind of neutral sense, is in a way even the more fundamental interval of this piece. And it's an interval of, I would say, indecision. And it's a kind of pivot. If we have an octave, of course, the middle point is not the fourth, it's not the fifth, it's the tritone. That's right in the middle. Plus, let's say we have it also connects different scales which are half steps apart, this way, or basically an augmented fourth apart, we should say. But if we have, for instance, F major, then it would connect to the dominant of E major, or C major, which is the dominant of F, connects to F sharp, that way, and etc., etc., etc. This is so. This kind of indecision, is it this, is it that, is at the center of this piece, and we see this all over the place. Now, the first time where we feel this half step comes at the very beginning of the piece, in the cellos and basses. So we start in a way, and this is part of what I mean by this kind of theatrical sense in this piece, or a sense of being kind of diary or a monologue, something. And that is, we start in a very, very, very normal, as I mentioned before, and I mentioned again, kind of bourgeois way. Can you actually see me? Yeah? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. And then it's like, okay, I'm in the country. I'm going to go out and chop some wood. All right. But maybe... No. And then... And then... And then we have a fugue. It starts again. This way. But before that, this melody, which in a certain way seems so simple, is not at all simple because of this kind of almost plastic expansion and contraction by half steps that we have. So we have that, we have that, not down, but okay. And remember, we were in F. Then he goes to B, to the dominant of E that we have here. And then here, and this, so the third fits inside. Look at that. So, and it has this kind of meaning. Oh. And then he expands again. Going in the subdominant. But then... And then we move on. And then we have all this kind of clash this way. And the clash is not something that is in a way resolved, but it's moved to. So the clash is the important part. And then we go on to the clarinet, we go back. And of course, this sort of academic exercise, which is not at all academic, in fact, of this fugue, but has this kind of setting of the stage, let's say, in the play, is sort of tossed out the window. Yeah. And then we see, oh, that's actually in D minor. Oh no. But something happens there. And then again, and I feel all these major thirds that we have here are very interesting because they actually outline minor chords. So the major third is not major, but the major is actually minor. Oh. And then we don't know if that's C major or not, but in any case, the orchestra comes in a half step too loud. And then we have this part. Moves that way, starting to twist and turn by half steps again. This again, half step sort of tension gains and gains until, and then there we are here, and then that goes from here, and that gives you our second primary chord. I'm going too long. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. So the primary chord, but again we're going to E, not F, but E this way, and then he moves on this way, and we finally end up here in B major, and then this starts here. This way, and I really feel that these accents that are put in, that Nielsen did put in later, although he originally wrote just the slur, do a disservice to this, because in fact this is just, again, kind of naive children's melody, which in different guises comes back throughout the piece. So that's it. Oh, that's so cute. That's like. Oh, also. And that second melody supposedly came to Nielsen in a dream, for what that's worth. But anyway, so we have this going E major. And then the orchestra, of course, comes in that way, thinking, no, you may think you're in one place, but you're wrong. This is not right. And then, oh, really? So, and then we go briefly back to our F. But B major. So again, we are just. But the orchestra, once again, is going, no, that's not right. And then we have, again, a kind of psychological moment, because it could be B major, but we have instead, this way, it's a G sharp minor, because it's like, oh, am I not right? Is this not me? And then the organ, I don't know. And then, again, B major. But, and then we have, then E minor here, but then we go into C major. That way. So it's all this kind of contrast of, what should I say? It's in a way, destination, musical destination. Are we in B major? Are we in C major? Are we here or here? All by this kind of half-step alteration that we have here. And even here we start this way. So another, that way. C major, B major, that way. So, and then we continue on with all of this here. And I think that we gain kind of intensity as we work. This sort of quasi-jazzy thing, and I pointed out about this last week, so I'm not going to deal with this right now. And then next one. And then if we look at the intervals here, we see that way. decisive indecision of this augmented fourth, or its tritone, but together with C major together, it's like, and that too, it's like, you don't even know where you are. Yeah. And then it moves on. And again we have this, sorry, here, going from B major here, after his C major. It's going all the way to there, and then remember that the fifth, together with the second, is the primary interval that we have primary one. And here he has basically a whole cluster of all the open strings in the orchestra. So, and then, which gives you throughout this whole thing, and then the clarinet comes in and should do basically from here, go to there, as I mentioned, but does not reach it. So again, with that significant tritone is there, and as I mentioned again last week, I'm going to say this a lot because I am recapitulating it quite a bit. Nielsen told Oxenvad, hold that G a long time. Like I want to go, I'm F, concert F. That is me, not this. And you see, the thing is that tritone then defines the reason why he wrote the half steps, this chromatic scale, before. It's like trying to move, you see. And unfortunately, when this piece is generally played, because it's difficult, I guess, and I have to say that this piece, in most performances, I put my foot in my mouth again, of course. Whoop, have to zip my mouth closed, but I zip it open. That, has this sense of weightlifting, let's say, as opposed to music. So it's kind of like, Nielsen. Yeah, no, I'm not. Don't worry, I'm not going to bash my mouthpiece, but. I made it, Nielsen. Yes, okay. But it's not that way, and even here we see a development in this, which is very interesting in this. So there we go. That way, which is E major there, but with that extra half step. And then, and this kind of augmented triad, this augmented chord, I should say, becomes more and more and more important in this piece. It's like, you see, this way. And then after that, of course, we have these terrible intervals. Oh, coffee. Oh, that's good for me. Thank you. I knew why I'm being so unfocused. Thank you. This way. And then finally, we move on. And then the intervals start with this again tritone, but then they expand, and then finally the fourth, and this pure interval inversion of the fifth. Again, we're F. That way. But the orchestra, of course, refuses. And then moving on. We go to C major, our dominant. Yeah. So in structuring this, the second theme is comes in a very classical way in the dominant, and then it changes. And then here, and this is a very special moment as we're going from major back to C. And we can look at that perhaps as a quotation from Mahler, but it's, again, I go back to last week and when I was talking about icons and how also Nielsen expanded in this piece the notion of musical icons this way, taking gestures which were very, I should say, common or sort of representative of romantic time, etc. Is it time? Yeah. And using them in this piece. So these, I would not say this is a quotation, but it is an icon. And this... Okay, then we go on, and of course we go on to this section here, which I analyzed last week to show you that this is actually a very, in a certain way, common and beautiful harmonic progression, moving to, from and to B flat minor here. This, and this is one of the places where Nielsen told Oxenvad, this should sound like Bach. Yeah. So. And it should go. But instead of that, instead of resolving, it goes immediately. You see, this would go from here that way. But he doesn't resolve, but instead goes, and that should go to here. But he goes, nope. Immediately. He breaks this way. So emotionally, he breaks this. Uh-oh. Am I done?
What do you mean?
Just that you're worried about time, right? Yeah. No, we have a little bit of time. We'll keep going for a while. Yeah, okay. So we have this, and we come to the next section of the piece. So what is interesting in this is that we see how this work came in a kind of wave, which again started in such an ordinary way, but became more and more psychologically complex in a way, and then ended with this cadenza, this time a very small cadenza, with this wave, and then after that, started again. So then we have... And again, it's very ordinary music in a way, and in a tremendously self-conscious way, because... Ooh, that's so nice. And then starts here, and all of a sudden, B major. Uh-oh, something's not right. And back here, right there, and F sharp. And then here, and then again we have our augmented chords, and this whole tone scale here, and the whole tone scale is also, it's an important part of this work, and we can look at it in very interesting and significant ways, because a whole tone scale has only two versions. You can that way, separated by a half step. And then, of course, if you go back another half step, it's the same as the first one. That way. So you have 6 notes and 6 notes. That creates 12. Yeah. So anyway, so it gets more and more convoluted in a way with this. And then here. And then finally, this kind of Wagnerian moment. And we have here. And we come to this fascinating place here where we have that, remember, double dotted F sharp and 32nd note happening that way. But what happened in the strings from here, then, the whole thing is this sort of whole tone. Whoa! As the clarinet on top of that, it's as if the clarinet comes in on all the wrong beats, trying to find the way. See? So again, very, very psychological moment in this kind of sea of uncertainty. And then that's C sharp that ends on. Now the clarinet itself ends on D sharp. That way. Remember these two notes. Okay, then we start with the cadenza here, and Yeah, I know. I'm not because I'm not going to finish it. I thought that's it. Well, maybe I should. I'll try again. Then, and again, these again augmented. Try it again. Remember that piano in pencil. Then moving. And I play too fast, of course. And again, like Bach, he mentions. And then we move on from there, from this Bach to this section. And remember that we are basically throughout here starting, and we are basically in the world of E at this point. Yeah. Okay, so this is important to remember here. Then F here. And Nielsen told Oxenva then, play as many as you can. I still think probably if you learn this piece, you should play the right number of notes. You know, I think it's safer to do that. But there's a kind of thing, I don't like sitting down and playing all the time, but I think that it has to be this way. So that again, it's theatrical way. It's like after this massive sort of psychological struggle that you have, you pass out. Then you wake up and you wonder, where am I? I mean, you sort of remember, but this part, which is so very beautiful coming up, Nielsen has taken this and distorted it as if we're sort of in this hall of mirrors where you distort the face this way, that way, this way. So this is distorted, pulled and stretched. And this bigger fourth, third, fourth, third. Then going up. Then we're here, and we come to G sharp. So do you remember the first two notes? With the G sharp there. This is our primary chord in inversion. This way. Which then moves on to C major and then to E major. That way, and it kind of Schubertian way. And we start again. No, not yet, not yet. I'm sorry, but almost yet. Almost. I have to go on just a tiny bit. I'm very sorry. I know. But, so, everything is as it was in the beginning. Except we are in E major. So we have here, this is and then again, and the clarinet comes in. But it moves this way, but there's something wrong with it. And we continue here, rather than evolving like the beginning does, something happens and it becomes incredibly intense until finally we end up with this kind of and then F comes in as if you're affirming, no, this is wrong. This is not my personality. And this is why I wanted to stop here and not before, because there's one extra note in this, and that is, instead of a rest here, Nielsen originally wrote a G sharp. So we have here, and then we see that in fact this is just like this. Comes out of that transitional material here. So finally, we see that that material comes in the clarinet part, and then will come back in every single section, significant transition in the piece. This way. Okay, so I've been told that I must stop. So I'm going to stop here, and I will have to continue and finish this next week, I think. Okay, so everyone, thank you for bearing with me. I get carried away with this, especially with this, but I do promise that I will be very efficient and I will finish this next week. And I will also, you don't think so? No, yes. I know it was a whole year's worth of articles which I wrote about this. But in any case, I think I will definitely finish. Be well. Take care. Be careful. And have wonderful time with music.